The first time I visited him, he spat in my face. I was 19 years old. My mother had been dead for 2 years, and the man who killed her was sitting across from me in the cold fluorescent glare of the state penitentiary visiting room. His name was Jerome Watts. He was 47 years old, gaunt and gray-faced, with the hollow eyes of a man who had spent his life making the wrong choices. He had kidnapped my mother from a parking garage, driven her to an abandoned warehouse, and demanded a ransom my family couldn't pay. She had died of an asthma attack in his truck before he even got the money, the inhaler clutched in her hand, useless, because he had been too panicked to let her use it. He was convicted of manslaughter and grand larceny, and he was sentenced to 30 years. And I had spent every major holiday since his conviction driving 3 hours to this prison, sitting in this chair and offering him food. "You again," he growled that first time, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "What do you want, girl? Come to gloat? Come to tell me I'm going to hell." I didn't gloat. I didn't tell him anything. I just reached into my bag and pulled out a chicken sandwich, his favorite I had learned from his prison intake form, and slid it across the table. Then I pulled out a small flask of Macallan whiskey, the good kind, the kind he hadn't tasted in 2 years. His eyes widened. His hands trembled as he reached for it. "Why?" he rasped. "Why would you—" "I killed your mother. I took her from you. Why would you bring me this?" I didn't answer. I just sat there, watching him eat. When the visiting hour ended, I stood up and walked away. I came back on Christmas, then New Year's, then Easter, then his birthday. Year after year, I returned. I brought him chicken sandwiches and whiskey, magazines and books, small comforts that the prison didn't provide. I treated him better than I treated my own father, who had remarried within 18 months of my mother's death and had seemed almost relieved to be free of the burden of grieving. I treated him better than anyone had ever treated him in his miserable, violent, wasted life. And every time I came, I asked him about my mother. "Tell me about her," I would say. "Tell me what she was like in those last hours. Tell me what she said." At first, he refused. He cursed at me. He threw the sandwich on the floor. But over time, the food and the whiskey and the relentless kindness wore him down. He started talking. Small things at first. The color of her coat. The way she had looked at him with pity instead of fear. Then larger things. The route he had driven. The warehouse he had chosen. The exact moment he had realized she couldn't breathe. The exact moment he had decided not to help. "I could have saved her," he whispered one Christmas, his voice cracking. The inhaler was in her hand. She was reaching for it, and I grabbed it. Did I threw it in the back? Did I told her to stop faking? I thought she was faking. I nodded. I didn't cry. I had stopped crying years ago. And then what happened? She died. She just stopped breathing, and I panicked and I dumped her at the hospital that I ran. But the police, they already had my plates. They caught me in 2 hours. He buried his face in his hands. "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Did I know that doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry." "I know you are," I said softly, "but I'm not here for your apology. I'm here because there's something you don't know, something I've been waiting 5 years to tell you." He looked up, his face hollow with dread. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small photo album, its leather cover worn smooth by my fingers. I slid it across the metal table toward him. "I've been taking care of your mother all these years," I said, my voice calm and even. "She's been living in the old house on Elm Street, waiting for you. Every dollar you sent her from prison, she never spent a penny of it. She saved it all for you for when you got out." He stopped chewing. His hands went still. He stared at the album as if it were a live grenade. "Your mother," he whispered. My mother? She's alive." She was alive. The cancer took her last month. They couldn't treat it. She died in her bed, alone, still waiting for the son who never came home. The sound that came out of Jerome Watts was not human. It was a howl, raw and broken, a sound of grief so profound that the guards at the door shifted uneasily. Tears streamed down his weathered cheeks. Bits of sandwich fell from his open mouth. He clutched the album to his chest and sobbed with the abandon of a man who had just realized he had destroyed everything: his victim, his mother, his own soul. "I'm sorry," he wept. "I'm so sorry. Your mother, she died of asthma. But I let her go that a nurse was already there. She took the emergency inhaler right from my hand. I only took her for the money. I already knew the rest. MyMother's death had been ruled an accidental acute asthma attack. Jerome had been charged with manslaughter and grand larceny. But I knew now that the story didn't end there. The nurse he mentioned, the woman who had taken the inhaler from his hand, who had let my mother die while pretending to help, had never been investigated. She had never been charged. She had simply vanished into the world, her role in my mother's death buried under the chaos of the kidnapping case. I reached into the album and slid another photograph across the table. This one was of a woman I had known my entire life, MyMother's best friend, my godmother. And now my stepmother, my father's most cherished wife. "Lydia." "The nurse," I whispered, my eyes locked on his. It was her, wasn't it? Jerome stared at the photograph. His face went very white. Then he nodded. "Yes, it was her. She was there. She took the inhaler. She told me to leave. She said she would handle everything." His voice dropped to a shaking whisper. "She was the one who planned the kidnapping. She told me your mother would be at that parking garage. She told me exactly when and where. She said we'd split the ransom and both walk away rich. But when your mother died, she vanished. I never saw her again. I thought she'd been caught too, but she wasn't. Was she? She got away." "No," I said quietly. "She didn't get away. She married my father. She moved into my mother's house. She raised me as her own. And for 20 years, she let everyone believe my mother's death was a random tragedy." I stood up from the table. I gathered the photo album and tucked it back into my bag. Jerome was still sobbing, his body shaking with the force of his grief and guilt. The guards were watching, their faces impassive. The visiting room was cold and gray and utterly silent except for the sound of his weeping. "I'll be back next month," I said. "I'll bring more chicken sandwiches, and you're going to tell me everything you know about Lydia. Every detail, every conversation. Every piece of evidence that will put her away for the rest of her life." He looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen. "Why? Why did you do this? Why did you take care of my mother? Why did you bring me food and whiskey and kindness for 5 years?" "Because I needed you to trust me, that I needed you to talk, and I needed you to understand what it feels like to lose someone you love to the same kind of betrayal my mother suffered." I leaned down, my voice dropping to a whisper. "You were the weapon, Jerome, but Lydia was the hand, and now I'm going to destroy her." The investigation that followed was the most meticulous of my career. Jerome's testimony, combined with the evidence I had gathered over 5 years, phone records, financial documents, the original ransom note with Lydia's handwriting disguised, was devastating. Lydia was arrested at the country club, in the middle of a charity luncheon, her Chardonnay glass shattering on the marble floor as the FBI agent snapped the handcuffs around her wrists. My father stood frozen, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He had married a murderer. He had brought her into our home, into my mother's home, and laid her head on my mother's pillow. The trial was a sensation. Lydia's defense crumbled under the weight of the evidence. She was convicted of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, manslaughter, and fraud. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. My father divorced her within a month of the verdict. He tried to reconcile with me, but I didn't respond. Jerome Watts died in prison 2 years later. I received the news in a brief phone call from the warden. I didn't attend his funeral. But I did send flowers, a small bouquet of white roses, to his mother's grave on Elm Street. She had been an innocent in all of this, a woman who had waited 20 years for a son who never came home. She deserved to be remembered. I still practice law, and I still fight for victims, for the forgotten, for the people the system has failed. MyMother's photograph sits on my desk, her smile frozen in time. I visit her grave every month and tell her what I've done, what I'm still doing, what I will never stop doing. And when people ask me why I spent 5 years visiting a murderer, bringing him gifts and kindness, I tell them the truth. Revenge is not a sprint. Revenge is a slow, patient, meticulous art. I was the daughter who seemed to forgive her mother's killer, but I never forgot, and I never forgave. I was just waiting, and when the time came, I destroyed them all.